Afternoon, West in the world. Welcome to your semester's final review video for the week of April 22nd and 24th. Our lectures this week have centered around the end of the Cold War and the creation of a new world order. There are important themes that have emerged in our discussion, but rather than try to tackle those particularly, I thought I would use this final review video to talk a little bit about what I think are some of the key issues related to the final exam as a whole. And I haven't quite finished writing the questions for it, so this may get a little off base. But here are some of the things that I'd want to make sure I was ready to talk about if I were you. The last section of this course has sort of taken off from the build-up to and the events of World War II up until the present day. So World War II and the Cold War feature particularly prominently in this. On the one hand, it is an era when we need to be able to understand the sort of diminishing power of the old dominant states, when the states that, like Britain and France and Germany, that have dominated our consciousness have become less significant, and the United States and the Soviet Union have sort of moved into the center position. So we need to understand those dynamics and what the significance of those developments proved to be during the 20th century. We've talked a lot about sort of the Cold War as an all-pervasive event, especially in the Western mindset, that it's far more than just a political strategy or a political set of maneuvers. So you want to be able to explain how people are responding to the pressure of the Cold War. And you might think of that in terms of events like the Cuban Missile Crisis and the fear of nuclear annihilation. But you might also think about it in terms of things like student protest movements against the Vietnam War and why that became so all-pervasive in Western society. What were people unhappy with that led them to protest against the war? Very similarly related to that, you need to be able to think about sort of the rise of the women's movement, of feminism, and what kinds of discontent are represented in that movement and in the work of people like Betty Friedan. Those things are, of course, largely centered in the West. In terms of understanding the dynamics of Eastern Europe, we need to be able to explain and articulate what it is about communist rule that leads to events like the Prague Spring, and then ultimately how is it that communism essentially collapses on its own weight, under its own weight. In many ways, the Western civilization doesn't win the Cold War, just the communist philosophy proves unsustainable. And so understanding the particular causes of the collapse of the Soviet Union in terms of economic crisis, discontent of laboring classes of people, the war in Afghanistan, and of course also the sort of political instability caused by the death of Brezhnev and his successors. Understanding those dynamics and what it is that people are responding to from an Eastern European perspective is also likely to be quite crucial. And then, maybe more significant than any of this, would be the question of what has sort of the Western and European, how has the Western or European relationship with the world at large been changed in the second half of the 20th century? And here, of course, you want to be able to draw the links between World War II, Cold War dynamics, and the processes of decolonization, the end of the old empires of Britain and France, and to be able to explain how it is that language from the Atlantic Charter and other documents like it move out of World War II and into the public consciousness, the global consciousness of people, and lead to this movement for decolonization and why it happens at that particular time. those to me are the big themes that we've been developing. We concluded today, of course, and you want to give some thought to this, by trying to describe what has become of the world after the conclusion of the Cold War between 89 and 91. To be able to explain what evidence there is that might support the general optimism of a Francis Fukuyama, or the more pessimistic or conflict-driven view of a Samuel Huntington. Are we becoming a more united, peaceful, stable world, or are we becoming one just as clearly as ever divided along lines of religion and ethnicity, etc.? Those, I think, are the main things for you to be thinking about as you prepare for next week's final exams. Remember that you have until Friday, tomorrow at the end of the day, to let me know if you're interested in adjusting your final exam time, either earlier or later. SI review times are in your email, and good luck. Thanks again for a great semester. See you Monday or Wednesday.